Professional athletes are some of the biggest heroes of our time, and they get paid to match. But just because these NBA stars have tons of cash, that doesn't mean they live their life like a flashy millionaire. These wealthy NBA stars choose to live like average Joes. Let's find out how. Number 10. LeBron James. LeBron James is one of the most famous players the NBA has ever seen. And of course, that means he earns even more than the other rich players, with contracts worth tens of millions and his Nike contract worth a mind-blowing $1 billion. He's definitely not tight on cash. How does he spend it all? Well, he doesn't. Whenever he can avoid paying for something, he does. And it's not just the big things either. According to his friend, Dwayne Wade, he won't even buy mobile data. Obviously, LeBron James travels a lot, but it turns out he just hops from one Wi-Fi hotspot to the next to stay connected in a new city. Crazy, right? Apparently, he won't pay for a decent music streaming service either. At practice, he just listens for free on Pandora and ignores the ads. By the way, he also cycles to practice instead of driving, but that might be because he owns a little Kia instead of a Ferrari. Maybe he should have bought a slightly smaller house and saved some of the $23 million he spent on data. But who are we to judge? Number 9. Matt Bonner. Matt Bonner is super careful with his NBA millions. The veteran and all-around hero, also known as Red Mamba, has a surprising approach to money. There are loads of examples of his weird spending habits. Until 2006, he'd been driving a Pontiac Grand Prix, and he has no plans to replace it. He only got rid of it when he got involved in a minor crash in 2013, and the car couldn't be repaired. With a new car on the horizon, you'd expect an NBA player to buy a convertible at least. But not Matt. He instead opted for a Chevrolet Impala. Sure, it's not a bad car, but with his millions, you would expect something that isn't marketed as affordable. It's not even like he was retired and worried about holding onto his cash. But that's not his only weird money-saving habit. At the height of his career, he was regularly spotted on the subway, and he's also well known for his sandwich blog. It's exactly what it sounds like. He reviews sandwiches. No Michelin-starred restaurants for him. In 2014, he was quoted talking about what he thinks splurging is. It turns out to him, splashing out was buying a pizza at 4 o'clock if he felt like it. That's instead of waiting for Domino's late-night deal like he used to do. I guess just because you're a millionaire, that doesn't mean you have to change the way you live. Number 8. Matthew Dellavedova. In 2014, it was revealed that the Cleveland Cavaliers player Matthew Dellavedova had a pretty weird pregame ritual. At the time, the Australian-born rookie had just signed a $1.3 million two-year contract. Sure, that's not loads by NBA standards, but it's more than enough to keep anyone happy. But even with all that money, he and his teammate Sergei Karasev would make a weird little trip before every game. Where were they going? To find the media room. They had a special interest in that room, no matter where they were playing. See, media rooms were always packed with pretty good food. To Matthew, that meant a free meal before every game. Neither of the two players were struggling to put food on the table, but you'd have to be pretty crazy to pass up a free steak, right? Matthew grew up with a dad who was a bus driver and a mom who was a teacher, so his family wasn't super wealthy. He clearly knows the value of good free food. And let's face it, we're all wishing we had access to those media rooms now. If you were a basketball player earning millions of dollars, what would you do with it? Tell us in the comments. Number 7. Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard became a star player for the Spurs at only 21 years old. In 2013, he was guarding LeBron James, and in 2019, he was part of the team that won the NBA championship for the first time in Toronto Raptors history. But despite earning a huge paycheck, like the $103 million three-year contract, you'd never know he was so rich. Up until 2016, he was still driving the very first car he had ever owned. It was a 1997 Chevy Tahoe, worth only 0.03% of his annual salary. Eventually, he bought a Porsche, but he continued to drive that Chevy for years. When asked why, he said it gets good mileage. That's not something most millionaires ever think about. But he's one of the most focused players in the NBA. Why does he work so hard when he doesn't want to spend the money? It might all be down to his dad. He says his dad taught him to work hard by making him wash cars at his business. If Kawhi didn't wash them until they were spotless, his dad would make him do it again. But despite the tough love, they were very close. Sadly, when Kawhi was just 16, his dad was murdered at this car wash. It was pretty tragic, and the police never found out who did it. His mom thinks that Kawhi approaches his career with a laser focus because it helps to distract him from his dark thoughts. He started working extra hours after his dad's death. He'd often get up at 5 a.m. to go to the gym before school, and his mom would find him shooting jumpers at 11 at night. He's not interested in all the money. When asked why he doesn't own a fancy watch like most other sportsmen, he said he didn't want to spend money just so other people can see him wearing something expensive. Number 6. Adrian Dantley. Adrian Dantley isn't just a Basketball Hall of Fame inductee. He's also 25th on the list of players who scored the most points in the history of the NBA. But these days, he's working a very different kind of job. You'd think he was doing it because he'd run out of cash. But this star of the 1970s was paid well and has not gone broke. In fact, when this story broke, he was living in a house worth $1.1 million. But even with his fancy pad, you were most likely going to see him on the street helping kids cross the road. That's right, he chose to work as a crossing guard for Eastern Middle School in Washington, D.C., where he was earning just under $15,000 per year. That's a pretty baffling career choice, and you're probably wondering why he'd want to spend his time doing that job. There's a good answer though. It offered health insurance benefits. That's something that NBA veterans don't get, but crossing guards do. Sure, he could have just paid for some, but he didn't want to. There's at least one story out there of him jumping in front of one of the kids to save their life though, so maybe he's in exactly the right profession. Number 5. Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson has been a star player for the Golden State Warriors for years. He earns more than enough cash for his NBA stardom. But back in 2013, a pretty interesting story broke when he received his first fine in his NBA career. He'd been involved in a minor fight between a few players from his team and the Indiana Pacers. The NBA fined him $35,000 for it. But that wasn't the weird part of the story. It was then revealed that it wasn't only the NBA fining him for his offense. His dad would be fining him too. How does that work? It turned out Klay's parents had total control over the 23-year-old's money, and they were keeping him on a seriously tight leash too. He was receiving only $3,000 per month to pay rent and another $300 per week for other expenses. That's crazy for a basketball player. The idea was that this would ensure Klay wouldn't blow all his cash and would have plenty left to secure his future. But still, when you're a player earning big checks and your dad is telling you to buy supermarket wine instead of taking someone on a date, it's gotta hurt. Can you hit subscribe before another NBA player receives a multi-million-dollar paycheck? You have 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Number 4. Giannis Antetokounmpo. Bucks player Giannis Antetokounmpo has built up a net worth of a whopping $70 million. But that doesn't mean he's a big spender. See, he grew up pretty poor on the streets of Greece as the son of Nigerian immigrants before becoming a big name in basketball. That means he understands the real value of money, and he's not about to spend it on just anything. The most famous example of this was back in his first 4 years in the NBA. He was earning millions, but still insisted on flying economy class. It's worth remembering that he's a whopping 7 foot tall, but he still didn't think it was worth it to buy a first-class ticket. He says he finally decided to buy a first-class ticket in his 4th year when his contract was renewed for $100 million. Let's face it, most of us would upgrade to first class with just a couple hundred extra on our paychecks. It looks like he still only buys first-class tickets when his family flies with him, but that proves another important thing about him. He doesn't splash out when he's paying for himself, but he's more than happy to give tons of cash to his family. When he signed his Supermax extension in 2020, he celebrated by buying clothes and toys for his son. It's actually pretty adorable. Number 3. Trey Burke. Trey Burke isn't the richest player in the NBA. He earns a lot less than some of his peers, but still loads more than the rest of us. He was earning just under $300,000 when he was with the 76ers, but his salary has now gone up to $3 million since he signed with the Dallas Mavericks. Most people would think that's rich enough to not worry about money. But Trey has set a strict budget for himself. He's limited to spending only $5,000 per month. That's way less than he could spend if he wanted to. So why does he do it? It keeps him on the same level as most middle-class Americans, which will help him remain humble despite his millions. Let's face it, $5,000 per month isn't a bad life anyway. Number 2. Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony started out in the NBA with the Denver Nuggets in 2003, and his long career has earned him millions. Between 2014 and 2018, he was signed to the New York Knicks on a 5-year contract worth a whopping $124 million. More recently, it was reported he earned about $2 million a year. That's a lot less than before, but still way more than most people can wish for. So, how does he spend all his cash? Well, he doesn't if he can avoid it. In 2011, he revealed that he still goes to the supermarket just to pick up newspapers he can clip coupons from. Obviously, millionaires don't need to save a couple cents on grocery shopping. So why does he do it? When asked, he simply said, "I'm human too." I guess that means he's remained humble, despite his huge net worth. And finally, the #1 richest NBA player who lives like an average Joe is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan isn't just one of the most famous basketball players of all time, he's a sporting icon. And as one of the most famous athletes in the history of the world, he's also one of the highest paid of all time. According to Insider, he has a net worth of $1.6 billion. Numbers like that are almost unheard of in the sporting world. He's earned most of it from his NBA contracts and endorsement deals, but he's maintained those numbers by living like an average Joe instead of the billionaire he is. In fact, he's so careful with his money that other players think he's cheap. Apparently, he tips very badly, and when Charles Barkley was on Oprah, he took the chance to tell the world about all the times Jordan had stopped him from giving money to homeless people. Like this video? Then you'll love this one.